screens and our old organizational hierarchical patterns and our old kind of inbred feelings about what humanity is about, and we hide behind all these walls, and in the end our projects go downhill because of this lack of interaction or lack of communication. So today I want to talk about, I'm calling it agile analytics here. I'm aware that agile analytics is actually a proper term, and there's even books about it. This might not be by the books of what agile analytics is. It's more about agile in the true sense, in the semantic sense of the word, things that are fast and sly as a fox and all this kind of stuff. And I want to talk about what we can learn about agile when we're working in analytics, and if there's something that can be kind of exchanged back and forth between the two things. And I hope that one of the outcomes of this talk will be that you're going to be just more confused than you were before. I really hope that happens, because that means that I've succeeded in what I'm trying to do here. It's really fuzzy, and I really haven't compiled my ideas into a proper presentation yet, so I'm kind of piloting this on you as well. Just a few words about myself, because for once it's relevant. I work for a company called Reactor, which is a Finnish. Well, we now have offices in other countries as well, but the reason I'm mentioning it is because we've been doing Agile for 17 years, since the turn of the millennium. And we're first and foremost software developers, but today we have designers, analysts, data scientists, CROs, marketing folks, everybody wins. So today I'm going to be talking about much of my experiences with Reactor, which has been 3 years now. If it sounds like I'm pitching something or trying to recruit, please ignore that. That's definitely not the point here. But I want to be honest about what kind of clients we've been having and what kind of projects we've been doing. So just to get us started, who recognizes, I've written it down there, so I'm not going to ask the question, who recognizes this? This is the Agile Manifesto. If you go to agilemanifesto.org, you'll see this. It's a beautiful website, by the way. You might want to take a look at it. Lots of things you can do with Times New Roman, I think. So the Agile Manifesto says, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. The Agile Manifesto recognizes that both of these dichotomies here are important, but we want to emphasize the first over the latter. Because only by emphasizing these bolded statements here do we achieve agility, do we achieve the kind of machination that it requires to be really reactive to what actually happens in a project. I know that many people have been working on big projects before, and I don't know if there actually are verifiable successes of a waterfall model, for example. Like, has anyone ever succeeded in the way they imagined they would? Where you first have a huge, big plan written by a number of consultants, and then this plan is put into action by developers completely isolated in their chambers, and then finally the product is released to the open, and then everybody just praise that people use the product as they thought they would 2.5 years ago when the plan was written. So agility, it doesn't directly attack this phenomenon. It doesn't directly attack this kind of juxtaposition of ideas. But what it does is it seeks to emulate the human behavior we're looking for in projects. Like when you think of how a child learns things, you don't give a child a comprehensive Excel documentation. And these are the features I expect you to realize into action in the next 5 years. But instead, they learn from mistakes, they stumble, they pick themselves up, they learn, they change their goals all the time. Like my baby boy is now 10 months old, and I'm looking at an agile project that we have we have our scrum in every week, and we have our daily stand-up meetings where we go over what we're going to do today. And his project idea is very different from mine. It's mostly about excrement and different kinds of sauces and food that he can digest. But funny that I said excrement, because it does remind me of a lot of IT projects. So there's many parallels to be drawn between raising a child and trying to work in IT. I'm not just saying that totally as a joke. It actually has a lot of reflections there. And many of the ideals we have in agile methodologies are things that come from armchair theoreticians who think, what would be the ideal way to work in a software project? And agile is a lot about idealistic things. The things that I'm going to be showing today, I have 30 minutes of time. I can't say anything meaningful, I'm going to be doing a lot of idealistic painting up here, so that's why the square jar is here. It's going to be a lot of stuff to that. But the idea is there's a terminology to be understood. And that terminology might be very different for what we actually do in projects that need to be budgeted, that have allocated time boxes, have scopes that need to be understood. So Agile is very interesting, and I really, really hope that you guys, if this rings a bell, then keep on reading. There's lots and lots of material online about this. So why Agile works with analytics? Well, first of all, agility emphasizes reaction. We're being reactive all the time. When something happens, we react to it. Typically, this might mean something that, we put a feature out into the wild, and we run an experiment on that feature, and the experiment result is instantly incorporated into our next sprint, or the next sprint after that. So we're looking at how are people actually using these things that we are building and reacting to that so that we can pivot if necessary. It's totally okay in a project to be wrong and to reevaluate your goals. That's totally okay. If you're working on something for many months, it might be disheartening to know that it's no good. Nobody uses that thing you built. But the thing about Agile is it requires a very human understanding of when to stop something, when to understand that, okay, this has gone far enough. Let's stop. Let's not stick to the original plan because the original plan sucked. So agility is very much about this. We have to understand when we've gone too far, and we have to look at the data we're receiving to find that point optimally. Agility recognizes the power of a multidisciplinary team. We all know of projects where, I'll mention the waterfall again, there's a team of developers working on something. There's a team of designers, team of UX people, team of CROs, team of SEOs, marketing, all these different teams working on things one after the other, or even worse, working in parallel at the same thing without telling each other they're working on the same thing. We've all been there. What agility emphasizes is this kind of multidisciplinary attitude towards working. We have a single team or a couple of core teams, but they're built of different proficiencies, different people with different skills. In most of our projects, we have designers, UX designers and UI designers sitting side by side with developers. I'm in the team as an analyst. We have data scientists in the team. We have the business owner, the project owner in the team. We have tester, experimentation being run. Everybody's sitting around the same table or sitting in the same room, constantly communicating. Now that's an amazing opportunity for knowledge transfer first and foremost, because what am I doing on a daily basis? I'm learning from people who do different things than what I do. And this broadening of the worldview is one of the side effects of Agile, which I think makes it more than the sum of its parts. I'm constantly learning about what goes on in other people's heads. I'm trying to avoid being in a bubble only of analysts, for example, because we have our own, deep ingrained ideas about the world. I don't want to be in that bubble. I want to escape that bubble, because most analysts I work with are really annoying and kind of stuck with their own paths. They refuse to look outside of it. And that's where this lack of multidisciplinary attitude is where these really, marketing hates IT. This dichotomy is born from that friction. It's not helped by tools like tag management solutions who say that, now marketing doesn't need IT. It's all part of this same friction that we're trying to alleviate, and recognizing the fact that we're all hybrids. We all have the seed of knowledge from other people around us. It's like really Aristotelian in a way. We can all learn from each other, and the big problem is when we stop doing that, when we go back to our IT and our designers and stuff like that. So agility really embraces multidisciplinary attitudes. Well, this is the core idea of agility, and is the incremental approach to building. It might be prototypal, so you build a prototype first, then build more and more on top of it. For example, if I were to work on a new checkout form or a contact form, I would start with a very bare bones form that has fields and a submit button. I would experiment on that, see if that works. If it gives me good data, the next increment might be adding server-side validation to it. So if you give a wrong answer or an invalid field, it tells you did that. And the next one might be an autocomplete, going really crazy here with the front-end stuff. So adding an autocomplete. And these are all done in series of sprints. They're not all done at the same time, because when we start building the form, having so many different verticals and the different kind of things different features incorporated in a single sprint, you have no idea which one works. So if the form is, if we do build all of these in a single sprint, for example, and then we experiment with the form, we have no idea why the users are abandoning the funnel. There's just too many things was built at the same time that it really hurts the experimentation stuff. You could do multivariate stuff if you have enough visitors and you have a very good logic to what you've been building. But typically incremental building requires approaching stuff with a minimum viable product is what we call it. That's the first thing you build in the first sprint. Just a simple single form that does what it should do. And then you start building the fluff around it and all the other stuff. And agility brings the feedback loop. So instead of just going on and on and on, you know, we might get some positive feedback from our internal testing team, and the business owner who's been sinking money into it says, yeah, this is a good form, because they're afraid to say anything else because that's their money. And we're just building things like a tunnel vision. And agile software projects have this problem. They're only concerned about doing things, getting things shipped. You know, the definition of done is to get things shipped. Get shit done is literally one of the agile slogans. But now as analysts, we can bring something new to the mix. We can actually validate stuff with external data, with data from people who actually use the form. And this is something that I haven't yet cracked. This is what I'm going to be talking about today. I haven't yet cracked how this is done elegantly. But imagine in a perfect world, you would build an iteration, run tests on it, run UX and peer reviews, you know, heat maps, session recordings, whatever qualitative and quantitative data you can get. And then maybe in 2 weeks' time, you have enough data to show that, hey, by the way, this server-side validation, it's a step in the right direction, but it doesn't really cut it. So what about if we try inline validation? Because that's the feedback we got. So there's a feedback built. And now look at this process. Contact form, validation, autocomplete, and back to validation. That's agility. You're going back. You're not erasing what you've done. You might erase the server-side validation stuff, but you're not erasing all the knowledge you accumulated in this time. You learn something important about not only about your product, but about your visitors as well. And this is where the analyst shines. This is how you can inject yourself into an agile team. You promise to facilitate this kind of thinking. And this is your strength as somebody who is familiar with numbers and the tools that bring about these numbers. Let me just go on because I think I'm, again, going to be running out of time. Inspirational quote, number 1. Is it okay to quote yourself? Like, how douchey is that? Well, I did it. And I'm going to speak it out loud now. Data is the lifeblood of the organization. It flows through all departments across job titles, permeating the very fabric of the organization, reinforcing its foundations for growth. It cannot and should not be contained in one vector, a dedicated analyst alone. Behind those beautiful, elegant, eloquent words, you'll find the idea that if you hire an analyst into a project and expect them and want them to be the analyst in the project, you, in my opinion, you're doing it wrong. And let's see what this means. The first thing we can do, we can learn, and these are now things that you can actually do in your own projects and things that we can pick up from agile projects. First one is collaboration. Agility is all about transparency. At any time, anybody should be able to walk into a room where a project is being done and within 10 minutes know exactly what the situation is. Know exactly where you are on the roadmap, what's being worked on currently, who are working on the project, what the current blockers are, and what the current state of experimentation is. And the way it works is that you have constant meetings, time box meetings, and they're not the kind of meetings you're probably used to, where people are Facebooking and you know, not listening to anything. For example, these daily meetings are called stand-up meetings, and that means that it's not like you're doing comedy all the time. It means that you're actually standing up around a table. Nobody has any laptops anywhere. You're going over the backlog and saying what you're doing today. What's going on? How are you? You know, I'm working on this today. I have this problem. Can you help me with it? Okay, I'll help you. Let's talk after this meeting. You're constantly communicating where you are today, what you're doing, and this is a daily thing, every single day. You can do it over the phone if you're like an external satellite consultant, whatever it's called. So that's the daily meeting. There are some ideas that you can. I'm going to be sharing these slides, by the way. So then there's a sprint planning meeting, a great place for analytics. You're going over the stories you want to work on in this next time box sprint. A sprint is like you decide for the next 2 weeks we will work on these features. So you might be talking about, as an analyst, your input might be, hey, that's a really interesting thing. I think we should measure that. We should add that to Google Analytics or whatever. We should run an A/B test on that. That's your input. You're building a feedback loop, and you're getting feedback back from the other people in the team. Do you think this is important? How will you measure the success of this feature? Is this something I can help you with? Everything is discuss. There's no hard and fast things. You do this, you do that. Everything is about discussion, finding a path together. A backlog grooming is where you have this backlog full of post-it notes in the traditional way of doing agile, and you're going over what comprises our current project. And note that this can change. You might start with a very different project and end up with something completely different. That's how agile works. But the backlog is your best idea currently of what the project will entail once it's built. And in the backlog grooming sessions, which are typically once a month or something, or once a sprint even, you talk about success. If we build this product like this, what is the measure of success for that product? If we build the checkout form like this, how will we know it's being successful? We know when it's done. We have a list of criteria for the developers for it to be shipped out, but how will we know if it's successful? And that's a really, really difficult question, and I guarantee that most agile teams don't know how to answer that question, because for them, success equals shipped. As long as it's shipped, it's successful. And this might sound like an old-fashioned way of doing IT, but it's a compromise. You can't expect the world to change in one night. But as analysts, we can inject the notion of successful. What is success? We have the tools, the terminology, and the expertise to measure that success against metrics that we define together. And then we have, one of my favorite parts of a sprint is the demo. And that's such a beautiful idea. At the end of every sprint, people show what they've done, what they've actually shipped. They show the checkout form. No matter how fugly it is, they show it. That's the point. They show that last 2 weeks I've been working on this. It can be something really, really basic, but as long as you show that you've been doing progress, it's a mutual feeling of happiness to know that the project is progressing, even if it's progressing in really small increments. At least you know that something's happening. What a better place for an analyst, again, than a demo to show data about the current project, about the current features. Do a big-ass dashboard on the wall and show them, hey, by the way, these are the adoption rates for the features we built. This is some real-time data from our campaign. This is our A/B test. Maybe don't do any peeking, but this is our current experiment that just finished, and now we have the results. So use it as your venue to help the others in the organization understand the terminology of analytics. That's what we're doing here. We're cross-pollinating terminology because it's all about communication. Then there's this idea of a definition of done. A definition of done in an agile project is a list of things that developers need to check when they're building a feature. And once the checklist passes for the feature is finished for that sprint. That's the definition of done. It's a living document, it changes all the time. You're constantly renegotiating it, but it's one of the most important parts of a sprint because it gives you a structure. It gives you something that keeps the agile chaos in order and somehow. And typical things might be, test coverage. We've been creating new unit and functional tests that cover all our new code. The feature has been documented. Documentation is a bit of an anathema in agile projects. I completely subscribe to that. Last time I wrote a measurement plan was in 2008. But it's a good idea to document when necessary. There's also a level of agility about documentation. And then there's this idea that feature passes peer review. You have somebody look over your code and it's fine, or a UX person checks that you built it according to plan. So this is a simple definition of done. As an analyst, you can enhance it and add the following task to all the definition of done tickets in your, or checklists in your organization. Feature measurement has been discussed. So whenever a feature is built, there's a communication going on where you talk, should this be measured? Should this be tested? And the answer might be no. I used to be one of those measure everything and let the tools sort it out. But today, especially in light of data retention stuff and GDPR, and that might be a thing. But we want to measure the interesting stuff and the meaningful stuff, and we want to change our data collection. We wanted to live with the project itself. But it's a great place to have a discussion. Is in the definition of done. So this By the way, this single thing here eliminates the horrible feeling you get in 6 months when somebody asks, by the way, what is our revenue for this and this and this? And you go, oh yeah, I should have tagged that. So you'll never have that problem again if every single time a feature is developed, you talk about how it should be tagged, how it should be measured. It's such a simple discussion to be had. It takes 5 minutes of your time and just has a binary answer, yes, no. But it eliminates so much chagrin you'll have with mistagged things. Then we have the multidisciplinary team. This is the worst scenario. You have a project where there's the IT folks and the UX folk are working directly with it. Marketing might have a offhand relationship, but then you have all these stakeholders, these really important folks who have no daily contact with the project, no daily contact with the team. They just swoop in when called, or the analyst swoops in when not even necessary, and then people don't really like them for that. So this is really bad. It's lack of involvement. I think this is quite a typical way of doing a project. You have certain parties working on it sometime, and then a new party working on it, and so on and so on. This lack of involvement leads to stuff getting lost in the handovers. There's a marginally better way to do this, which is where people talk to each other. Surprisingly, communication is important. So this is marginally better. You now have established communication relationships between all the different folks. So that the IT people have a weekly meeting with marketing, telling what we've been doing. Marketing then tells to the business folks what the developers told them they've been doing. It's like a Chinese whispers, anybody? It's bound to, messages are going to get lost. Because the problem, again, is that they're not talking around the project itself. There's no contact to that. It's all about hearsay and these really forced meetings between these different stakeholders. So the way to fix it is to bring them all around the same table and be part of the daily team. Be part of the daily team in some capacity, even if it's just a 5-minute talk every day you have. And this increases transparency, involvement, shared knowledge, which is so important in Agile and in any project, regardless of if it's Agile or not. Shared knowledge is important. But a multidisciplinary team is what we're looking for. And these are, again, ideas that we should be able to do in all our projects today. It just might require some lubrication of the organization. You might need to figure out an incentive model, if they're not doing this already, how to get them around that. And we just talked to Craig about this before we got here, but one of the ways is you can build this incrementally. You don't have to change the entire organization overnight. You can start with a small team, your current project, for example, and turn that agile. Take these ideas of daily meetings and multidisciplinary teams and see what happens. A very, very viable end result is that it sucks, and you'll go back to the old way of doing it. I'm fine with that. I'll sleep over the night. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. But just give it a try and try to do that agilely as well. And the one thing about the multidisciplinary team is that Conway's law is just really interesting. It's this mathematician in the late 60s wrote that something to this effect, that any organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. And what this means is that if you have an analyst working on data collection, developers working on features, a UX designer designing the user experience of the site, and if none of these parties talk to each other, then all the systems these parties build, like dashboards, the features, and the A/B tests, they will not communicate either. So the communication patterns between the things we work on and the way they mesh together reflect the realities of our interpersonal communication patterns. So by fixing this problem, i.e. talking to each other, the systems you build will, as a result, talk to each other as well. And there are lots and lots of case studies that back this up, this point. So we might want to take a look at Conway's law as well. Another quote by someone. A good consultant should work in a manner that inevitably makes them redundant. So it doesn't mean that you're working yourself out of a job. That's not the point. It means that your attitude in a project as a consultant should be so that you're disseminating information, you're teaching others what you know, you're teaching your trade secrets. The best possible project, in my opinion, for a consultant is where the in-house people learn more every day and at one point know exactly as much as you do, even more about what you're doing. Because at no point will you as a consultant have the intimate knowledge about that organization's business or their ideals or their values as somebody who's been working in-house on that. So the people in-house, if they come equipped with your skills, amazing stuff will happen. Well, what happens to you now that you've taught all your wiles and trade secrets away and you're left with nothing? You're like a derelict in the company, shunned by all, loved by none. You can do something else. Use your time for something else. You can focus on the important stuff. Look for new things to sell. Look for new places where to inject your information. You'll never run out of a job if you're being altruistic in those projects.
They end up asking really hard questions.
Yes.
That's what happens. You don't end up out of a job, they just ask really hard questions.
Next idea, hire to educate, not to delegate. It's horrible when world-class experts like Mr. O'Neill are hired to a project only as extra pair of hands. Do this, build me a report, build me a report which shows me users against conversions or something silly like that. So you're hiring this amazing individual, and you're just hiring him to do stuff that you just don't have time to do yourself, running stupid Google Analytics reports and stuff like that. Where instead, you hire them to be this person who tries to educate and teach. Hire the consultant knowingly as a facilitator, somebody who helps you build the same process that has made him or her so successful. This is the ideal. And like I said, I'm going to be drawing a lot of idealistic pictures here. But this is how we want it to work, right? We hire consultants from the outside to help us and teach us, not because if we need extra pairs of hands, there are many other ways to do that except to hire somebody who costs like £1,000 an hour. I don't know what Peter's rate is, but I'm sure it's somewhere up there. I'm running out of time, which is fine, because the last bit is something I have a link here. A very recent article of mine talks about the definition of success. One of the things that Agile doesn't do well at the moment is talk about success, because success is subjective. I might have a definition of success about a feature, and you might have a different definition of the same feature, what is successful to it. Success is temporal. What's successful today might not be successful in 2 weeks' time because the business landscape is evolving, it's a campaign. Success is non-binary. There are various degrees of success. It's not just this was successful, this was not successful. It might be this was a bit successful, this was a bit unsuccessful. It's difficult. Success is really difficult, and that's why Agile projects kind of avoid it, because they don't have to juxtapose this subjective notion with the very rigid and objective notion of a definition of done. So the definition of done asks, are we doing things right? Are we following these steps and shipping out a really good, consistent project? A definition of success asks, are we doing the right things? Are we doing things whose net value is of increase to our entire organization, to our project, to our team, to our end user, to our client? Are we doing things that give us a feeling of success? The thing I'm trying to talk about here are feelings. And they're completely alien in many software projects, but we have to be happy about what we're doing. We have to be very glad that what we're doing is the right thing. And I think that the kind of beauty about analytics is that it gives us a very brutal and honest answer to that, and it tells us, ignore those feels, look at the numbers, but now we can actually turn those numbers into something that relates to success in a project. But it's not easy. And this is just an example of what we do in some of our projects. So we have a definition of success where we define for the team, for the client, and for the end user, every single feature. What is successful? Yes. And this was happily my last slide as well. So I hope that this brought you some new terminology maybe or some ideas, and I hope you have a very successful day.